Have you ever caught yourself wondering why, even when there's love, it still hurts so much? Or why some relationships seem to drain your energy instead of making you stronger? This video isn't just about toxic relationships. It's about what happens inside of us when love turns into something that no longer nourishes, only consumes. Today, we're going to talk about invisible patterns, memories that shape our choices, signs you may have never noticed, and real ways out. Not with judgment, but with awareness. Stay with me until the end, because throughout this journey, you won't just understand what you're going through. You might find the courage to start again, and the strength to choose, maybe for the first time, yourself. Sometimes all we need is to open our eyes and find the key that was always within us. Ever felt like you were losing yourself in a relationship? As if the love that was supposed to embrace you was slowly destroying you? As if something inside you was screaming, but you couldn't hear it? Sometimes this cry comes disguised as exhaustion, as a sigh in the middle of the night, as a choked silence in the middle of a conversation. It's soundless but heavy. It's formless, but it presses. And the question that hammers deep within the soul is always the same. What have I lost in myself while trying to keep this love going? The silent pain of being by someone's side and still feeling empty. Of smiling in photos and crying in the bathroom. Of sleeping together and waking up alone inside. Of doubting your own intuition. Of swallowing your own truth. Of diminishing your own shine all to maintain a feeling that deep down no longer cares for you. To ask yourself every day if this is truly love or a disguised form of emotional imprisonment. A prison where there are no iron bars, but invisible chains. The fear of loneliness, the attachment to routine, the insistent hope that everything can still change. Today, we'll explore one of the most sensitive and urgent topics. Together, toxic relationships. And not with judgments or ready-made recipes, but with the courage to look at the shadows we sometimes call love. We'll understand why we stay in them, what holds us back, how they camouflage themselves as affectionate gestures, and most importantly, how to break this cycle that corrodes our identity and silences our inner voice. Because the problem is that we can't always see that we're trapped in a cycle. And even harder is accepting that the love we receive may be destroying us, especially when we grow up believing that to love is to endure, that to care is to watch over, that to give of oneself is to forget oneself. Sometimes we call love something. That is actually a fear of being alone. Other times, it's an unconscious repetition of everything we've experienced and learned as normal. But just because it was common doesn't mean it was healthy. What's familiar isn't always safe. Sometimes, it's just what pain has taught us. But today, we'll have the tools to name, understand, and if you wish, start over. Because liberation begins with awareness. And awareness begins with the right question. Does what I'm experiencing expand me or shrink me? Heal me or sicken me? Bring me closer to who I am or distance me? What is a toxic relationship? Toxic. Relationships don't start out toxic. In fact, they begin like fairy tales. A tale where passion is intense, captivating, almost intoxicating. Everything seems magical, as if you finally found what you've been searching for. The person appears as the answer to all the questions you didn't even know you were asking. Every message is a relief for your neediness. Every gesture, a soothing of old wounds. And it's precisely this illusion that makes them dangerous. They masquerade as healing, but they are a continuation of the pain. At first, it feels like care, concern, interest, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, the intensity turns into demand. Affection turns into surveillance. Attention begins to suffocate. What once felt like connection now weighs like an obligation. Care becomes control. Interest becomes invasion. And you begin to wonder when you stopped breathing deeply. You realize you're always explaining yourself, justifying yourself for wanting to be with friends, for having different opinions, for having dreams that don't fit the mold of the relationship. You're constantly walking on eggshells, mincing your words, retreating from yourself to avoid conflict. Your individuality is slowly extinguished, like a candle suffocated by an inverted glass. There's still fire inside, but the air is running out. A toxic relationship doesn't scream at first. It whispers seductively that you've found the one. And before you know it, you're trapped in an emotional system where your worth depends on the other person's mood. You start to believe you need to deserve love all the time, and that if it doesn't come, it's because you've failed. They convince you that you're the problem, that the other person is like this because of you, that if you were more patient, more understanding, more caring, maybe everything would be different. And in this desperate attempt to be accepted, to prove you're good enough, you mold yourself, silence yourself, and annul yourself. Each concession seems small, but little by little, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize who you see. And the cruelest thing is that, on the outside, everything seems normal. Social media displays smiling photos, loving phrases, and promises of eternity. No one imagines what goes on behind closed doors. But inside, you're losing yourself, silently, deeply, like someone who's sinking and no longer has the strength to cry for help. ANA's Stawa Wyatter was 28 when she met Marcos. She worked hard, had few friends, and carried a silent need that had been there since her adolescence. When he appeared, with his protective manner and sweet words, she felt she had found a safe haven. For the first few months, he was charming. He brought her flowers, texted her all day, and told her she was different from everyone else. Aina felt special, desired, and loved. But what seemed like caring soon turned out to be controlling. He questioned her clothes, criticized her friendships, and said everything was for her own good. Over time, Aina began to isolate herself. She avoided going out, spoke less and less with her family, and began to believe that maybe she was wrong. She felt guilty for wanting space, for wanting time alone, for wanting to continue studying. Marcos told her she didn't need anything else, because she already had him. And every time she tried to talk, he played the victim. He told her she was overreacting, that she was too sensitive, that he only wanted the best. And after the fight came the apologies, the promises to change, the tears, the pleas for forgiveness. And Aina, caught between love and pain, believed things would get better, but the cycle repeated itself, over and over. Deep down, Aina no longer knew where Marcos ended and she began. Her desires, her wishes, even her way of thinking, everything was shaped by the fear of displeasing. She stopped dreaming, growing, living for herself. And yet, she felt she had to stay. Because when you live with something toxic for too long, the pain becomes routine. And routine, even though it hurts, gives a false sense of security. Invisible patterns. What is behind toxic relationships? None of this is by chance. Our adult relationships aren't formed in the present. They're built with the emotional bricks of our past. They're often distorted mirrors of what we experienced in childhood. And you don't need to have experienced major trauma for these patterns to take hold. Sometimes, all it takes is growing up in a home where love was conditional, where you had to behave a certain way to be praised, where affection came after sacrifice, where there was affection, but also emotional absence. When affection is mixed with pain, the mind learns that this is normal. If we grow up hearing that love is suffering, relationships are really hard, or that you have to swallow a lot of frogs to keep someone by your side, this becomes a silent model we follow, even without realizing it. We begin to associate control with care, jealousy with attention, pain with emotional depth. And so, what hurts disguises itself as love. We repeat patterns because they're familiar. Because the familiar offers an illusion of security. The mind, in its search for protection, prefers to suffer in a way it already understands, rather than risk experiencing something it's never experienced. It's the fear of emptiness, of the new, of freedom, because emotional freedom is also frightening. When you've only known imprisonment, this is where we come to archetypes, internal characters that inhabit us and are activated in these relationships. The victim, who believes they must endure everything to be loved, who believes that love is silently enduring pain. The savior, who enters the relationship believing they can fix the other, that their love is enough to transform any toxicity. And the controller, who tries to dominate everything for fear of abandonment, and therefore manipulates, isolates, and suffocates. The most complex part is that we often alternate between these roles without realizing it, and the relationship becomes a dance between wounds. These archetypes intersect, intertwine, and feed off each other. The victim reinforces the savior, who feeds the controller, and everyone ends up trapped in an emotional game where no one wins, only survives. It's a cycle that seems unbreakable because it was learned from those we loved most early in life. But the good news is, everything learned can be unlearned. The first step to breaking this pattern is to see it. When you begin to identify these repetitions, to observe your relationships with an emotional magnifying glass, you regain your power of choice. Because what is unconscious dominates you, but what is conscious you can transform. Signs of a toxic. Ariel-He-Ion-Se-Chi-In, you're in a toxic relationship. Your body speaks, even when your mind insists on remaining silent. Your chest tightens for no apparent reason. Sleep disappears. Anxiety becomes routine. And fear settles in like a shadow, hovering over every gesture, every word, every look. You don't need to be yelled at. All it takes is a sigh, a prolonged silence, or a sideways glance to set off your internal alarm. It feels like you're constantly walking on broken glass, barefoot, hoping not to bleed, but always bleeding a little more. You start to watch yourself, measuring everything. Your words, your tone of voice, the volume of your laughter. Suddenly, you're asking for permission to exist. And when you dare to be happy, you feel guilty. Guilt for being okay, for wanting more, for wanting something that doesn't involve the other. Your dreams start to feel like a burden. Your freedom, a threat. Your joy becomes a source of contention. And then you start to be grateful for not being alone, even if it costs you your peace. People around you notice. Friends comment that you look different. Your family feels your absence, not just physically, but energetically. But you deny it, say everything's fine, because you're afraid to go out and regret it, afraid of not finding anyone else, afraid to face the mirror and admit you spent too much time trying to fix what was never yours to fix. It's a vicious cycle. The more you try to smooth things over, the more you cut into your own skin. And yet, you continue, because a part of you believes it's love. But love doesn't make you sick. Love doesn't diminish you. It doesn't demand that. You erase yourself. Love doesn't manipulate. It doesn't blame. It doesn't control. Love liberates. Love holds your hand without squeezing your wrist. Love recognizes you, lifts you up, gives you ground and wings. True love builds it, never destroys. And if what you're experiencing today empties you instead of nourishing you, maybe it's time to stop calling it love. How to start getting out of this? The first and most important step is recognition. And this recognition hurts. It's not easy to look at something you built with so much affection and admit that love has become a prison. That care has become control. that the us has ceased to exist and only a you remains lost within. But recognition isn't weakness. It's the first sign of awakening. It's the point at which you stop deceiving yourself and start finding yourself. Looking at the relationship head-on requires courage. Courage to see without the filter of neediness, without romanticizing the good times as if they erase the bad days, without making excuses to justify what hurts, and most importantly, without blaming yourself. You were emotionally manipulated. They made you believe that this is what love is: effort, pain, sacrifice. But that doesn't define who you are. And it's definitely not what you deserve. The second step is to seek support. Talk about what you've experienced. Name the pain. Bring out of silence what's making you bleed inside. This could be to a friend, a therapist, or a support group. The important thing is not to walk alone, because when you remain silent, the pain takes root. But when you speak, it begins to emerge through your words. Talking about it is already an act of courage, a cry for freedom. A silent yet powerful enough. Then, start reconnecting with yourself. Return to yourself, to what made you smile without needing anyone. Regain habits that remind you of who you are. Read books that uplift you. Listen to music that touches you. Walk aimlessly and allow yourself to breathe again. Each step is a reunion. Each choice for yourself is a rebirth. And little by little, you will realize that there is life after the breakup. There is freedom. There is peace. There is home, and it lives within you. Breaking up with a toxic relationship is difficult. Make no mistake, it will hurt. It will be scary. It will feel like you're alone in the dark. But the truth is, staying in it is devastating. Because every day you stay there, more parts of you are lost. And with every small step you take toward yourself, even trembling, even in silence, you are healing. You are breaking the cycle. You are breaking the chains. You are learning, finally, that true love doesn't bind. True love doesn't demand sacrifice of your essence. True love is the one you also feel for yourself. You deserve a love that embraces you, that spares no effort to see you well, that listens to you even in silence. A love that celebrates who you are without trying to mold, prune, or diminish you. You deserve a love that builds together, that respects your space, your dreams, your truths. A love that walks beside you, not over your head. A love that doesn't demand you disappear to fit in, that doesn't transform you into a shadow of your own light. If today you realize something you were denying ... it's a start. And beginnings sometimes are silent. They're just a new thought, a nagging question, a discomfort you previously ignored, but now you can no longer silence. Acknowledging is the first step, and it doesn't have to be said out loud. Sometimes it's deep inside, in a dark room, lying, staring at the ceiling ... that courage is born. Just be honest, because the truth, even when it hurts, sets you free. Share this video with someone you love. It could be the key they've been waiting for. Sometimes it's content like this that ignites the first spark of change in someone. Someone needs to hear this. Someone can free themselves through you. Subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't talk about just any relationship. We talk soul to soul, from truth to truth. We talk about deep bonds, about pains that demand healing, about processes that liberate, the healing room. For those who have already understood that love should not suffocate, but heal. That pain is not destiny. It is an invitation to transformation. For those who are ready to break patterns and finally find a home within themselves. And if something you heard here touched your heart, if you have experienced or are experiencing something similar, leave your comment. Your story could be the starting point for someone's healing.